Mike Babcock, two-time Olympic gold medalist, Jack Adams winner, Stanley Cup winner. On accolades alone, he should be a Hall of Famer, but with a maligned past when it comes to his relationship with players and staff members. Just saying the name Mike Babcock causes an uproar in the hockey world. And with the news that he is being considered or is the favorite for the Edmonton Oilers head coaching job, people are talking, and not necessarily in a good way about the man. So I thought in today's video, we're going to go over Mike Babcock, his history as a head coach at the NHL level. We're going to deep dive into the controversies surrounding his tenure as a head coach in the NHL, all of which inform me that Mike Babcock should not be considered for the Edmonton Oilers job. He shouldn't be considered for any head coaching job. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here. And with that being said, let's get into it. So Mike Babcock Jr. was born in 1963, good old-fashioned Ontario boy, and he ends up going to McGill University in Quebec for a physical education degree and doing some postgraduate work in sports psychology. Now, I'm telling you this because there is a reason for it that we will get into later, as the stuff that he might have learned in sports psychology seemingly influenced the way that he treated his players further down the line. From there, he worked his way up the coaching ladder with Red Deer College, Moose Jaw in the WHL, University of Lethbridge, Spokane in the WHL, Cincinnati in the AHL, and then he finally scored his first NHL head coaching job with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. From 2002 to 2004, he was the head coach there, and he brought the team to their first ever Stanley Cup final in 2003, where they lost. And then the lockout hits, and he's hired as the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings in 2005. And I don't think I need to go super in depth with his tenure here, but it was a very, very successful one in that time frame, winning a Stanley Cup, making the playoffs every single season he was the head coach, extending that ridiculous playoff streak that the Red Wings had for, 25 years? However, while he did keep the playoff streak alive, after their 2009 finals run where they lost to the Penguins, he only managed to win 3 playoff series for the Red Wings until his departure in 2015, where he left for the promised land as an Ontario boy coming home to coach the Toronto Maple Leafs, a team that at the time was going through the early parts of their rebuild, and he was expected to bring a winning culture to the team. And as we'll get into, I don't know about that. First season that he was there with Toronto, it's a rebuilding year. They finished with 69 points, finished last in the NHL. But with Babcock behind the bench, he actually coached this team to play entertaining style, even though the Leafs, for the most part, weren't very good that year. Like I said, they finished last in the league. They win the draft lottery in 2016, draft Austin Matthews, and from there, it's off to the races. 2016-17, the Maple Leafs make the playoffs for the first time in a full season since before the lockout. Not the 2012-13 one, the 2004-2005 lockout. Bunch of rookies on this team, and we all know the deal here. They all make an immediate impact. Austin Matthews, a 40-goal scorer in his rookie year, wins the Calder. However, that 2016-17 season didn't come without some controversy. We'll get into that later. I'm just trying to go through his entire coaching career so far. But they make the playoffs, losing 6 games to the Capitals. In 2017-18, the team is off to the races once again. 105 points in the regular season. They have arrived, and they lose in 7 games to the Boston Bruins in round number 1. A bunch of the younger guys struggled, more specifically Matthews putting up, I believe it was 2 points in those 7 games. However, in the offseason, Kyle Dubas is brought on as general manager. He makes a big splash, signing John Tavares to a 7-year contract, and the Leafs look like a Stanley Cup contender. If it's not now, it's sometime soon, especially with Babcock at the helm. However, 2018-19, the team takes a step back. They finish in the playoffs still, and they have to face the Boston Bruins, but a lower point total compared to the previous season. The team was a bit more inconsistent. They weren't playing as well. Nylander comes on at about the halfway point of the season after signing his new contract. And the team just didn't look the same after that. And they faced the Bruins in round number 1 again. They lose in 7 again, and notoriously lose in a terrible effort in Game 7, 5-1. But because Brendan Shanahan and co. liked the Game 7 that Babcock coached, they decided to keep him around for at least the start of the season. So 2019-20 rolls around, and the team is off to a horrid start. They're not playing well. They're getting scored on too much. They're not scoring enough. Too much inconsistency in their play, which results in Mike Babcock being fired. And while it made sense at the time, we learned a few days later some tidbits of information that made the firing more reasonable. As it came out a few days after the firing, that he had treated some of the young players on Toronto very, very poorly, singling them out, making them feel bad. One specific moment being in the rookie season for Mitch Marner, made Marner write a list of players on the team from hardest working to least hardest working, saying it was going to be confidential, and then reads the list out to the rest of the team in the locker room, singling Marner out as the guy who wrote it. Now, luckily, players didn't get mad at Marner for it. In fact, they got mad at Babcock because why would you do that to a rookie? So while the firing made sense because the team wasn't playing well, the story about Marner that came out a few days later really put the stamp on that this guy may not be a good option as a head coach at this point in his career. And he ends up talking about it later on and saying it was a bad idea looking back on it. And while, sure, let's play revisionist history, I guess, it's still something that you did, and it was still a bad decision as a head coach. And as it turns out, that's not the only instance of him being difficult with young players and veteran players on the tail end of their careers, as there have been a multitude of stories about this guy from multiple different players and just different instances where it seems like he's just making decisions to piss people off in the locker room. One of the more famous examples is Mike Commodore, who's been very vocal about his displeasure with Mike Babcock as a human being and a head coach. Among multiple instances, Commodore said Babcock held him back in Cincinnati when he was head coach in the AHL, and that he did the same thing a decade later with the Detroit Red Wings, where he actively held him down. Babcock has since said that you need to be a good player in order to play on his team, and he didn't think Commodore was a good player. He's probably been the most vocal critic of Mike Babcock over the years and one of the earlier ones. But it's not just him, as Johan Franzen, who was quite a big-name player in Detroit during Babcock's tenure as head coach, accused him of verbal assault. This article from December of 2019 on CBC really goes into detail about it, including Chris Chelios recalling Babcock verbally assaulting Johan Franzen during a playoff series, so bad to the point where it seemingly had an impact on his life post-hockey, as in 2018, Franzen told Expressin that he had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder while also dealing with severe anxiety, depression, and panic attacks. He also said beginning in 2011 that he was terrified of being at the rink after the first time Babcock berated him. And then, quote, "He's a terrible person, the worst I have ever met. He's a bully who is attacking people. It could be a cleaner at the arena in Detroit or anybody. He would lay into people without any reason." And it's not just berating players and all that kind of stuff. It's sometimes just some straight up dickhead moves when it comes to scratching veterans when they're on the brink of a milestone. For example, he scratched Mike Modano before he was able to hit the 1,500 game mark, and scratched Chris Chelios before the Winter Classic in Chicago, his hometown. He also scratched Jason Spezza in the home opener of what would have been his first game as a Toronto Maple Leaf and what would have been a homecoming for him. And Nazem Kadri in his book also talked about the Marner situation and just how much of a fiasco that was, saying what a bullshit position to put a player in, let alone a rookie. It's not as though Babs was asking a veteran who could push back and say, "Fuck you, I'm not doing that." Mitch obliged, feeling pressured, forced really, to do whatever Babs wanted. When Mike Babcock is your coach and it's your rookie season, if he tells you to do something, you're probably going to do it. And then wraps up saying, He was a brilliant coach, but again, his tactics could also backfire. And with players having changed so much over the past decade, there's no longer a place in the league for mind games like that. And while I think we would all agree, the Columbus Blue Jackets would say, actually, hold that thought, as they hired Mike Babcock back in 2023 to a 2-year deal, $8 million per year to be the head coach of the Blue Jackets. A move that the organization otherwise would not have been able to do, considering they're a smaller market team. It's harder to bring in top-end guys or top-end coaches. And don't get me wrong, it had a ton of controversy at the time, but this is the thinking of the Blue Jackets, is that you can get a top-end coach for relatively, I'm not going to say cheap, but with no other competition to get him because he has such a sketchy past. But that didn't last long either, as Paul Bissonnette put out a video or part of his podcast, I guess, accusing Mike Babcock of looking through players' phones, more specifically Captain Boone Jenner. Now, I shouldn't have to go into detail of why that's just a terrible idea. His reasoning was that he was trying to figure out, what type of people these guys are, but I don't know, talk to the players and then you'll figure it out. You don't have to go through their phone for something like that. That's just some bullshit. And because this ended up being such a big deal around the NHL world, the Blue Jackets are then forced to get rid of Mike Babcock. They relieve him of his duties before he's even able to coach a game behind their bench. They replace him with, I believe it's Gabe Vincent. And Mike Babcock is never heard from again. Until now, where Elliot Friedman reports that Mike Babcock and the Oilers are closing in on a deal. He's apparently talked to the Oilers owner, Daryl Katz, and seemingly the conversations went well. He's also spoken to several members of the leadership team with the Oilers, all of which, again, seemingly have gone well, and he seems like the favorite to be the Oilers head coach. Now they have to go through NHLPA and they have to get their stamp of approval on this, but it's seeming like Babcock is going to be back in the league behind an NHL bench. And I want to read this bit from Elliot Friedman's blog because it's interesting, gives you some insight into why the Oilers would even think about doing this. It fits with what he's been whispered about the Oilers since their first round elimination to Anaheim, that even their core agrees they need a firmer hand on the rudder. Basically saying they want a veteran guy. They want a guy who's going to be able to keep everything controlled when things get tough. And to that I say, you had so many other options on the market. Laviolette, who's now the head coach of the LA Kings, was available. You also have Craig Berube, who has been in talks with the Oilers, it seems like. But out of all the names that are out there and available, you pick Mike Babcock. I don't understand the reasoning with this. Yes, on his resume, he's won Olympic gold medals. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's won a Jack Adams. On paper, if you look at his accolades alone, sure, he's a good option. But that's without nuance and without context. And if you put context and nuance into this situation, he should not be getting hired whatsoever. And especially a big market team like the Edmonton Oilers deciding, hey, we're going to bring in this guy who's got a bit of a shady past with rookie players. It's just, it's baffling to me that they're making this decision. And not even that, if you just look at his resume at all, outside of the gold medals and the Stanley Cup and the Jack Adams blinding you, this guy hasn't won a playoff series since 2012-2013, which was a lockout-shortened season. So you can go even further and say, in a full season, he has not won a playoff series since 2010-2011. That was 15 years ago. So even if you just look at his track record over the last 15 years, the fact that he has one playoff series that wasn't even in a full season, even that should tell you he's not a good option. So I don't know. I don't know where the Oilers and the situation goes. It seems like he's getting hired. I'm baffled that there are people out there defending this situation. Things like Frank Saravalli saying that, you know what, I would have picked him over, Barry Trotz or Peter Laviolette. Like, come on, Frank. I cannot believe there are people out there that are trying to defend this hiring whatsoever because it just shouldn't be happening. But it seems like I'm not getting my wish. It seems like he will be back in the NHL. And we'll see how the Oilers do with Mike Babcock behind the bench. So let me know in the comment section below. What do you think of this potential hiring? It seems like it's going to happen. Probably by the time this goes up, there may have been a deal already reached. But do you agree with the hiring? Do you not agree with the hiring? Let me know in the comment section below. But that is it for this one. I did hope you enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new. And I will see you in the next video. Peace out.